We are talking LA Kings offseason moves and more with Kings content creator Keith Freeze on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. Worked in sports media for the past 30 years. Also one of the co-hosts of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show, now in its 19th season covering the NHL, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com and you will get 50% off your first year. Well, we are happy to welcome back to the show Keith Freeze, formerly of the Hockey News, but he's been an LA Kings fan and content creator for some time. And you can follow him on X and Twitter and YouTube at Keith Freeze, F-R-I-E-S, Freeze. Freeze. I'm not going to just call you Freeze. I'm going to call you Keith Freeze. It's like Bond, James Bond or something. Keith, it's good to have you back on the show. I don't know what that was, but how are you doing?
I'm good, Garcia. How are you?
Yeah. I'm doing good. Last time we talked, I don't know if you remember, it was late December of 2024. And so it's been a little while. So there's lots of things to ask you about. So I do want to get your thoughts, not only as a Kings fan, but someone who follows the team as more than just a fan. Obviously, a fourth straight loss to the Oilers. Maybe since some time has elapsed since the initial devastation of what happened, maybe we've all had time to take a breath and look on it a little different. But how do you look back at how last season came to an end?
Well, I think the last time I was on your show, I predicted that the Kings would make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. So, in my head, that prediction is still going. But reality was a different story. I guess I could sit here and be sour grapes about it. Maybe people have their hangups about how certain things went. I don't know. I mean, I'll just, because I've heard so many people talk about Game 3 and Game 4 specifically of that series, I'll just say real quick that, you can't ride with these elevated opinions about Samson and the video staff throughout the entire year. And then when it goes sideways on you one time, throw up your hands. And, I mean, he had it right so many times. And I think in that moment, he probably had it right. For me, I just, I don't care if there's people out there that are watching this and they don't like my opinion, but I'm just going to say it how I feel it is. But in that moment, the referee stepped in on Edmonton's behalf and chose to look at the call before Edmonton ever made a challenge. The referees overturned their own call without Edmonton asking them to do it. They went to Toronto, and Toronto confirmed this. And at that point, if you're the Kings, you can't fight City Hall. And as much as I agree with Samson probably seeing something there, at that moment, you just have to know that you're not playing, an even game. If I can kind of, I know it's kind of, whatever, shocking or however you want to word it, but I just remember an NBA player sharing a story one time, and I forget what team he was on. Let's just say the Pacers, just for an example. But he was telling on this podcast that his team was playing against the Boston Celtics in Game 7 of the semi-conference championships. And at the time, it was when LeBron and D Wade and Chris Bosh had their three-man monster with the Miami Heat. And so this team, the Pacers, were going to play against Boston. And essentially the thing was his teammate turned to him and said, "We have to be up by 15 tonight to win by 1. And he goes, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, think about it. It's Game 7, us versus Boston. whoever wins this goes on and plays against Miami. Do you think the league really would rather see us versus Miami, or do you think they'd rather see Boston versus Miami? And so maybe that's like kind of a stretched out point, like to be up by 15 to win by 1. But I think the concept is probably true, which is that like there's, a bigger thing on the line of a more marquee matchup. I don't care. It's my opinion. People don't have to agree with it. But if you're going to tell me that you don't think the NHL wants Connor McDavid to be a Stanley Cup champion, you're crazy. So I'm not saying that they pulled it one way or the other. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm just saying that there's certainly it would certainly benefit the league if Connor McDavid was a Stanley Cup champion. I'm not even denying that. But also to that point, I mean, we can get hung up on game 3, but game 4, Edmondson gets tripped right in front of a referee. It's on TV in a zoomed in camera angle. The referee doesn't call it. I'm not saying it speaks to my point, but it's just kind of like, well, like, I guess we're fighting City Hall. So am I upset how things went? Certainly. I'm not happy that we didn't get further than we did, but I don't think it's so X's and O's to say, well, we made a bad call and things didn't go our way. And, against the Kings, I don't think you can win a series just by playing 3 forward lines and 2 defensive pairs. I'm not, obfuscating our responsibility in doing better. I'm simply more just saying that from an outsider's perspective, if I wasn't a Kings fan, I would certainly think, like it maybe wasn't just the Kings playing the Oilers. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, one of the reasons why I like having guests on is to get different opinions and different views on things. So there's no need to apologize for that. And by the way, for people who may not know, you mentioned Samson. You're talking about Samson Lee, the video coach for the LA Kings, who advises the coaching staff on when to challenge and things like that. Last time you were on, I did ask you if you thought Rob Blake would be the GM after the season. You said no, but you also had a theory that he might be moved to another position within the organization. That didn't happen, but obviously you weren't surprised that he was let go. Did it feel like it was time for a change in that position?
Yeah, definitely at the GM spot. At the time I said about him possibly moving into being the president of hockey operations, and then Luc Robitaille would be president of business operations. And, I'm going to stand by that. They just, from an outsider's perspective, I'm not in the room. I don't know them, whatever, but at least from an outsider's perspective, they do seem like really good friends. They seem to have carried on a bond with each other from their playing days in the 90s and in the 2000s. And it just seems like they are still really close to one another. Was it time for a change? I mean, I guess so. I'm not going to say that Rob Blake's decisions at the helm were so bad that they needed to, bring in a whole new GM and a new staff and all that. But I guess, things need to switch over in every profession so often. I mean, no business survives really by keeping the same people in charge and doing the same things over and over. You have to do certain different things over time to stay fresh. And if that's what the Kings are looking to do, is to try and bring in a new voice and try to win now, then I'm all for it. So was it Rob Blake's bad doing that cost him his job? I don't necessarily think so. I think it was just he looked around and I think he decided for the betterment of the organization, I'm just going to step away, because if I do become team president, what's that going to look like? And so I think he just, I'm going to give him a lot of credit in a weird way and say that because he stepped away, he did kind of, he made the organization the more focal point than himself. And I think the fans wouldn't have looked at it that way if he had stayed, even if it was Luc Robitaille's decision to keep him and promote him. But I don't think that his dealings as a GM were that bad. In fact, I can honestly say that he put us in a position to win. I mean, that's why Ken Holland's here, because we're that close, right? So how did we get that close? Like, well, he must have done a good enough job to get us where we are.
And we'll get into the specific moves for Ken Holland, but real quick, just your thoughts on him being the man to follow Rob Blake.
I don't know I'll be honest, I don't know too much about Ken Holland's record. I know that fans were really quick to try and, go negative on him to the point where people were bringing up his drafting record and his willingness to trade away first round picks and all these other things. But, I will say he's a 4-time Stanley Cup champion. And so I'm not going to discredit that. Isn't the whole point of winning, a Stanley Cup what you want from your GM? So for that, I'm okay with it. He's here for the short term. I don't think that he's looking to move the organization around like crazy. It seems like he delegated a lot of the draft responsibilities to Mark Iannetti and really leaned on him to do his part. And just from the start here, what I can kind of gather is that he knows that there's pieces in place within the organization that can do their job. So it doesn't feel to me from this initial couple months here that he's there to do it the Ken Holland way. I guess that's the best way I can put it. But I think that he has the experience. He certainly knows certain people within the organization already. And we'll see. He has the players that he brought in. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But in general, I don't have a negative or positive opinion about it. I just want to see the team do well.
All right, up next, we will talk about the Kings roster changes for next season. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. You ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing your money with your partners is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. That's not what I was wanting to do. We are continuing. If you weren't watching on YouTube, don't worry about it. We continue with Keith Freeze. You can follow him on X and Twitter and YouTube at Keith Freeze, Fries. Busy offseason for the Kings. Let's start, though, with the player that was lost, and that is Vladislav Gavrikov leaving for the New York Rangers. Seemed like he just preferred New York over LA. I was a little surprised ultimately that he decided to leave, especially for the money that he was paid for, $7 million per season. Were you surprised that Vladislav Gavrikov decided to leave?
Well, I guess I'll just answer it this way. Maybe people are saying that he preferred New York over LA. I haven't heard anything from Gavrikov, and for a guy that's kind of as transparent and as funny as he is, to be kind of tight-lipped about this situation is a bit abnormal for him. But from my perspective, I don't think he chose New York over LA. I think he chose Rob Blake over Ken Holland. What I mean by that is that Rob Blake's the one that traded for him. And I think Gavrikov really liked playing underneath Rob Blake as his general manager, so much to the point that he was willing to re-sign a 2-year deal. I know Rob Blake offered him a contract extension at some point during this past season, and he declined it. But our speculation about that is that he got offered a deal that he didn't necessarily want, whether it was too much term and he didn't want as much, or they didn't offer as much term as he wanted, or the cash value, whatever the reason is. But I believe I'm not going off of anything. So I'm just telling you what I'm kind of feeling about it. I think he really liked Rob Blake, and I think he was a Rob Blake guy. And I think as maybe at a certain point, Gavrikov got the feeling that Rob Blake wasn't coming back, even if Rob Blake wasn't public about it. And maybe Gavrikov kind of said, okay, I'm here to play for you. I'm not here to play for other people. And that was kind of maybe why he walked.
Well, the Kings did add 5 players in free agency, but one of them was not Mitch Marner. I had said that I was in love with the idea of adding a Mitch Marner because I'd always like to see the Kings being amongst the teams mentioned for the top free agents, which they were in this case. Ultimately, Marner chose Vegas, and I understand why he did that. I don't think that's necessarily a shot at the Kings not being able to, close out the deal on him or anything like that. I don't think they ever got a chance to even offer him what they were willing to put on the table. He decided Vegas was the place for him, and he went, and so be it. But what was your, as a fan, your wish list when it comes to Mitch Marner? Because he was very polarizing when I would bring him up on the show. Some people absolutely wanted him. Look at the numbers. How often is a player like that available? And then some people were like, absolutely not. Do not pay that kind of money for a guy who can't elevate his game in the playoffs. Where did you kind of come down on Mitch Marner?
So you're a jersey collector, and I think most hockey fans in general kind of do have some jersey collection to an extent. I have a lot of Kings jerseys. That's like the most for any team I have, but I have a handful of players that I have jerseys for. One of them is Patrick Kane with a Chicago Blackhawks jersey, probably one of my favorite players of all time. And I have a Mitch Marner Toronto Maple Leafs jersey. And I personally would have liked to have seen Mitch Marner in LA, not just because I'm a fan of his, but because in today's NHL, I think what really separates offenses is when your wingers are as skilled as your centers. And in this particular case, if he had joined LA, I would have paired him with Quentin Byfield because Byfield's a left shot, Marner's a right shot, and they could have just gone tape to tape, forehand to forehand. It moves the puck a lot faster. Nobody's flipping their stance while they're skating. To me, it made a lot of sense. I'm going to keep answering your question, but I might be like skipping ahead here a little bit in terms of the other things the other players that got brought into LA. But I was trying to think of a kind of like an analogy because I had a feeling this question might be coming up. But here's kind of like where the free agency thing for me was kind of like this. So the Mitch Marner rumor came out, and of course, rumors are rumors, but it really does seem like there was a lot of truth to the rumor that Mitch Marner was considering coming to LA. Then you heard the story come out about Ken Holland finalizing a trade with Calgary to get Anderson, and Anderson turned it down. So I am going to give Ken Holland a lot of credit because he actually made the trade happen. It wasn't him who didn't get it done. Now, here's a good analogy of how I can tell you things settled out for me personally. Eddie, imagine that your parents come up to you and they're like, Eddie, tomorrow we are going to an amusement park. And they don't tell you which amusement park, but they're like, we're going to go to an amusement park. And then like an hour later, your dad's walking around with Mickey Mouse ears on his head. And then an hour after that, your mom is singing It's a Small World After All. And then the next day you go to an amusement park, but it's Legoland. Like it was just kind of like that. And I'm not saying that to discredit who got brought in because Joel Armia and Corey Perry could kick my butt. That's regardless. What I'm trying to say is that my expectation hearing about Mitch Marner or hearing about Anderson possibly coming to LA, my expectation was Ken Holland is trying to go big game hunting and he's trying to add another person to the top forward line or the top defensive pairing. And when free agency came around, it was the other way around. It was solidifying the fourth forward line and solidifying the bottom two defenses. So I'm not upset about it. In fact, I actually like the moves. It's just not what I expected, and it's not what I anticipated. So maybe I sound harsh or critical, but I think that's more maybe how a lot of Kings fans felt. and maybe couldn't, verbalize it in the way that I just did. I think a lot of Kings fans immediately went to Negativeville with it, and I don't think that it's totally negative. I really don't. But it's just not, I think, what we had gotten our hopes up for.
Now, when you were on the show the first time, I had asked you about, growing up, how you got into hockey, and you admitted that in your younger days, you did cheer for both the Kings and the Ducks.
I did.
But ultimately, you decided on being a Kings fan, which was the right choice. But from that perspective, your thoughts on Corey Perry now joining the LA Kings?
Okay, well, I will, and I'm not just saying this because you've put me on the spot. Corey Perry is the reason why I no longer was an Anaheim Ducks fan. And I'm dead serious about that. I always liked Ryan Getzlaf and I liked Bobby Ryan. And I always felt like Corey Perry pulled them down and to playing a style of game that I just honestly didn't respect. And I've always liked Ryan Getzlaf. I don't think any Kings fan, if they were speaking objectively about the human being or the player, would say that he was a bad person or a bad player. It's just that he was with the Ducks. And so my whole thing is I told you that I grew up watching Paul Kariya, one of my favorite players of all time, Teemu Selanne, one of my favorite players of all time, Guy Hebert. These were great Ducks players when I was a kid. And of course, there has to come a new wave of players, and the new wave that came in was Getzlaf and Bobby Ryan and Corey Perry, and they were not playing the style of Ducks hockey that I liked, and so I was easy to move on from it.
So how will you support Corey Perry, or will you just? I've already said I can't envision myself ever cheering for him. I can't sit here and tell you that if he scores a game-winning goal, I'm not going to, be happy that he helped the Kings win, but I just can't bring myself to being a fan of his. I don't think I have a friend who's a Ducks fan. He claims by the end of the season, I'll be a Corey Perry fan. I don't see that happening, but we'll see. I can't predict the future. We'll see. But how is that kind of the path you're taking on this as well?
He's a King, and I'm always going to support Kings players. So, I say he's part of it, and that's good for me. That said, I want to clarify something because I kind of said whatever, and it also applies to this question, but I said that he was playing a brand of hockey that I don't necessarily like, but I love the Dustin Browns of this world. I love the Brad Marchands of this world. I like guys that play tough and then add in a little bit of scoring touch to their game. So Corey Perry, in theory, should be somebody that I really like. I just don't want him to get lost from that. I call it adding insult to injury, where, I'm going to hit you, I'm going to get in your face, I'm going to do all these things that annoy you, and then I'm going to score, and then it's really going to bother you. That's what I really like from those kind of players. So I want to see that Corey Perry. I don't want to see penalty box Corey Perry, because if I see penalty box Corey Perry, then I'm going to say, okay. But if he's part of the team, regardless, he's part of the team. I'm going to root for the King. It's always about the name on the front of the jersey, not on the back of the jersey. Isn't that what they say?
That is what some people say. Yes. And I agree with that. I do agree with that. Up next, we'll talk a little bit about what's coming up for the Kings. We will do that next year on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. We're wrapping things up here with Keith Fries, Fries, and you can follow him on X, Twitter, and YouTube at Keith Fries. Did want to ask you about Adrien Kempe. Contract is up after this coming season. I've said that they need to get this done before the season starts. If it's $10 million a year, whatever it is, let's get this done. I don't want this to stretch into the season. I don't want this to be any kind of an issue. He's earned it. I really hope this doesn't get done soon. Your thoughts on Adrien Kempe and whatever it is he might be wanting to stay as a King, maybe for life. Who knows?
I agree with you. I would like to get this deal done before the start of the season. I don't want there to be any distractions down, even if they got it signed a day after the season started. It's just, to me, Adrien Kempe is a homegrown talent. He's probably one of the best players that the Kings have at this point. And could he be a future captain of this team? Possibly. Maybe in my mind, I see him more as an alternate captain, like a really steady hand, kind of Drew Doughty type. But he is a cornerstone of this franchise, and I would certainly like to see him get paid to be that cornerstone. What that dollar figure is, I don't know, but if the value is $10 million for an 8-year deal, then it's $10 million for an 8-year deal. I don't think it's one that you really haggle over. I think you just say, yep, that's what you want, and it works for you, it works for us, and let's get it done.
You talked about being a jersey aficionado. I am as well. And with that in mind, you've done this a couple of times, but you have an idea for a Kings alternate jersey. I have it here. I took a screenshot of it. We're going to show it on YouTube. I'll let you explain what it is for those that are listening on the podcast. And we don't know if the Kings are going to have an alternate jersey or not this year. They haven't said. Some other teams have announced it. I think St. Louis, I think, was one of them. I know that has announced the jersey change for this year. There was one other team as well that I'm drawing a blank on. But since the Kings did unveil a brand new style of jersey last year, I'm kind of thinking they might wait another year before they have an alternate. But you and I have been in agreement on a certain style. And although I've always hoped that they would go back to the purple and gold, that doesn't seem like it's going to happen anytime soon. But I have always thought that the Kings should have a crown on the front of their jersey. And I'm going to show the design you have, and maybe you can explain what your thoughts on an alternate jersey for the Kings here, if not this year, maybe next year.
Yeah. So this jersey concept was the jersey striping that the Kings used during the 1980s. The striping is kind of similar to the modern day NHL Flyers, I guess, is a good comparable for the striping. But I just went with the current black, silver, and white color palette. And it's really the 80s jersey, even with the crown, but the updated older crown. And from that as well, the striping has that glittery silver. I think I've mentioned it before, but I'm not particularly a fan of the glittery silver, but it's what they have. So that's what I would put on this. To me, this is just a good alternate jersey. I don't know if it's necessarily what they would go with. I will say on my YouTube channel, I've also put up a Forum blue and gold jersey concept that I think probably is something that the Kings would more likely go with, which would just have the normal 70s striping with this updated crown on it in Forum blue and gold. But in terms of that jersey design, I think it's just more something just to sort of have as a visual, just to show that, if the Kings are going back to this older logo design, but with a new feel, I think that was more the concept behind that jersey. Like, let's not reinvent the wheel here, but let's also give it a fresh coat of paint.
Yeah, I understand the nostalgia behind the home plate logo because that was the jersey they wore when they won 2 Stanley Cups. So I get that will always be kind of you'll associate that logo with some good times. But like I said, I've always felt like there should be a crown on the front of the Kings jersey. And I like the idea because we have seen that in purple and black back in the day, right? I like the fact that you're employing the black and the white and the silver, but you have the old school crown on the front this time in black. So I like the combination of that. And I will say, if that does in fact come out, something like that, they will be getting my money.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you like it. And I mean, I will tell you, going forward, I've done YouTube videos about the Kings and just sharing my opinions if they do something hockey related. But going forward, I may not be doing as much Kings content. I'm still going to do Kings content, but I want to do more things like that. I want to do more graphic art stylized pieces, or just sharing those kind of design concepts for other things that the Kings might have going for them. So jersey design is something that I love doing. But I, you know, the Kings, I will say historically have always had really nice jerseys, and it makes it kind of easy to not deviate from what they've done and make something look nice. And I got to give a lot of credit to whoever has designed the jerseys and the logos for the Kings over time, because they really have made the organization look really, really nice.
All right. That is Keith Freeze, content creator for the LA Kings. You can follow him on X, Twitter, and YouTube at Keith Freeze, Fries. Keith, it was good to catch up with you again. Really appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of the offseason, and looking forward to getting you back on the show once we get to playing some hockey again and get your thoughts on the team.
Well, thanks again for having me on, Eddie. It's always nice talking to you, whether we're talking hockey or anything else. You're a good man, and I look forward to seeing you in the future, man.
All right. Thank you so much, Keith. Really appreciate it.
Have a good one.
All right, for you everydayers, those of you listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up, of course, in our next show will be our weekly fan feedback show, your chance to chime in on whatever is on your mind involving the LA Kings. We did have some extra emails left over from last week because we had so many over the last couple of weeks with everything going on with the team, but you still have a chance to get in on the show coming up next if you would like to. The email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. And we always appreciate your comments if you're watching on YouTube in the comments section. Also would love you to stay interactive with the show on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're at Locked On LA Kings, and the Facebook page, facebook.com/Locked On LA Kings. And if you're interested in even more Kings coverage, some extra coverage, you can send me an email to lakingsextra@gmail.com, and we'll give you the information on that. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thanks for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you next time. And as always, go Kings, go.